Okay, our beloveds, as you move forward on this collective journey of rediscovering your souls, you will find much that you don't care for. The hidden gems from your childhood are no longer desirable, which means that those nuggets of wisdom that you learned as coping mechanisms in your youth must be shed now. It's that simple. And until you shed them, you will continue to be stuck in the same mind construct. And many of you, as you are aware, will continue down this path because you simply are not ready. But many of you are. And as you go through this lunar eclipse with the full moon, you will begin to see a completion of sorts, giving birth to a new you. And you will shed the afterbirth. The afterbirth is that bubble, that balloon that protected you, allowed you to grow. It fed you. It cushioned you. It created a fluid sac which absorbed much of the impact so that you would be reasonably safe. You weren't really breathing on your own because the breathing and the feeding was done for you. And what we can tell you is, for each of you who are not avatars, when you are born, there is a shock to your senses because you go from this protective environment that is the only existence that you know as a soul, as a being, so to speak. But when you are birthed, right, your mind comes from, this was my reality for the last, give or take, 9 months, and I am now in a bright space, assuming you're born during the day, with people around me. I'm sticky, I'm wet, I'm kind of cold because all of a sudden I'm no longer in this warm tomb within my mother's body. And there's much to do. There's a cutting of the umbilical cord. There is a wiping off. All of a sudden my ears can hear. My eyes can see. My fingers can really touch. My nose is breathing. Do you understand? You are now awake in the physical sense, whereas before you were just being formed. And it is a shock to the senses. And this is where you are by being birthed from the Piscean to the Aquarian age. You're realizing now that you have many coping mechanisms that protected you while you were in the womb of life, being, we don't want to use the word nurtured because we really do not feel that it properly identifies the nature of the Piscean age, but it was the environment that kept you alive, that as a whole fed you, clothed you, kept you alive, and offered you an opportunity to get to the point where you are now, because without these protective mechanisms that kept you safe, you would not have arrived at the door of the reality where you find yourselves now. But the fact is that that protective casing that nurtured you in some sense by allowing you to be buffered from the harsh realities of life are coming to an end. And so right now you are in that phase of just being birthed. And we have talked about this birthing before, that we wanted you to really begin to tend to yourself while you were in the womb, because now that you are birthed, you have to figure this out. You have to start learning all these new ways of being alive. And you will do this by shedding the umbilical cord. All of those protective safety mechanisms that allowed you to sustain life will now be flushed away, cut away, stripped off, wiped away, and you will now begin to engage in the world as truly a sovereign human being who is no longer connected to anybody else in the most literal sense of being sustained. It is now you and only you, and you will get to figure this out. How you can do this, why you want to do it, how it feels. As your skin has sensations, you can now say, that doesn't feel good. And people will need to honor that. Before, if you said that doesn't feel good, you were in the womb. Who would have heard you? How would you have communicated this? Maybe through kicking or punching, but it was a different environment. You are now raw and naked, vulnerable and present. And you will begin to see through new eyes, through new sensation of touch. Your hearing will be so much more critically attuned to the nuances of life. Your taste buds will really come into play. Your entire system is coming to life. And your senses, which were numbed through trauma, through childhood trauma that then carried over into adulthood trauma, it's coming to an end when you choose to heal from it. But only you can choose to honor this new path of self-discovery and self-love. It is your journey, and you are literally in the birth pangs right now. And it is painful, it is scary, as you're being pushed through the birth canal. It is an unusual sensation, and it feels like death. The pressing, the squeezing, the movement, the being pushed through the eye of the needle, as we have shared about so much. And everything that is not you cannot come along and will be shed. And we're going to call those barnacles now the afterbirth. Everything that has been with you, that was designed to keep you alive, but no longer serves a purpose. But we do want you to look at it from this perspective. In certain cultures, they take the afterbirth and they plant it in the ground with a tree or a bush. There is much nourishment within the afterbirth that can feed another life energy, such as a tree or a plant. Don't dismiss your past as anything other than what it was. The coping mechanisms that you acquired during your lifetime was here designed to protect you. Give it that respect and that honor, that it did what it needed to do, but it is no longer needed. And then gently and lovingly move on, honoring that protective womb that got you to this point in life. And if you can do that without regret, without anger, without justification for bad behavior on your part, just simply honor how you got here and say, but now I have the luxury of recreating myself as a new being. And I choose to do that. I do not walk away from my past, but I separate from it as much as I can because it no longer supports or nourishes me. It is now something which is dying on the vine, so to speak. And I provide a grave for it where I honor it by planting, instead of a tombstone, a living energy which will use this energy of the past to sustain the life of something new in the present and into the future. And so it is. Namaste.